Salim, Sholmu, hello and welcome. My name is Samuel David. Some of you may know me as the author of Rod and Ring, an initiation into a Mesopotamian mystery tradition, published and distributed by Anathema Publishing. Others may know me as the author of Lioness, the Song of Inanna, published by Grail Press and distributed by Miskatonic Books. In addition to being a writer and a researcher and a malcontent, I'm also the host of this YouTube channel, which, after a hiatus, followed by an overhaul, followed by another hiatus, is back as Ancient Near East meets Modern West, wherein all things Mesopotamian are up for grabs, from literature to myth to spirituality and modern spiritual currents. On this episode, I'll be sharing my top reading material suggestions when it comes to the complex figure that is Inanna, also known as Ishtar, as well as highlighting the recent release of an exciting book that is long overdue. Now, more often than not, I receive a great number of messages from individuals requesting to know if there are any recommendations that I can make concerning books on Mesopotamian spirituality and myth, as well as gods. And for those who are interested in Inanna, this episode is for you. Now, first and foremost, my top suggestion, my top recommendation, is the book Ishtar by Louise M. Pryke. Ishtar is the first book dedicated to providing an accessible analysis of the mythology and image of this complex goddess. The polarity of her nature is reflected in her role as goddess of sexual love and war, and has made her difficult to characterize in modern scholarship. By exploring this complexity, Ishtar offers insight into Mesopotamian culture and thought, and elucidates a goddess who transcended the limits of gender, divinity, and nature. It gives an accessible introduction to the Near Eastern pantheon, while also opening a pathway for comparison with the later Near Eastern and Mediterranean deities who followed her. Now, my second recommendation is a bit outdated, as it was published originally in 1914. However, it does provide a great deal of insight into the religious expression of the deities' cults. Now, the full title of this book is Tammuz and Ishtar, a monograph upon Babylonian religion and theology, containing extensive extracts from the Tammuz liturgies and all of the Arbela oracles. Now, with the last three recommendations, I do want to preface this by stating that while the information that's contained in these books is incredibly informative, it is important to be mindful of the fact that a great deal of liberty has been taken with the translations, specifically with the adaptations of these translations. And the first of the three books that this is most apparent in is Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, Her Stories and Hymns from Sumer. And this was written by Diane Wolkstein with advisement and an introduction by Assyriologist Samuel Noah Kramer. This is a book to be cherished. In the myth of Inanna, Wolkstein and Kramer give us back the totality of woman, the ruler, wife, lover, redeemer, whom all worshipped and from whom all life flowed. It is a thrilling rediscovery. With regards to the final two books, both of these were written by Betty de Shong Meador, the first of which is Inanna, Lady of the Largest Heart, Poems of the Sumerian High Priestess Enheduanna. Finally, Princess, Priestess, Poet, the Sumerian Temple Hymns of Enheduanna. Now, with regards to Lady of the Largest Heart, while this book provides the complete texts of Enheduanna's hymns to Inanna, it also discusses how the poems reflect Enheduanna's own spiritual and psychological liberation from being an obedient daughter in the shadow of her ruler father to being a figurehead, if you will, within the realm of literature. And one thing to keep in mind is the author is a Jungian analyst, so she is bringing her area of expertise into play, not just with this book, but also to an extent in her second book, princess, priestess, poet. Now, while we're on the subject of Enheduanna, I do want to highlight the recent release of an incredible book entitled Enheduanna, The Complete Poems of the World's First Author by Sophus Helle. This book was published by Yale, and it also has an accompanying website, which is quite fascinating. And that website is enheduanna.org. I'm going to include a link to this website in the description of this video. What's fascinating about that website, it includes a literal translation and line-by-line breakdown of Enheduanna's best-known poems, as well as links to further reading and resources for learning more about her world. Now, in the author's own words, for the book, I did a series of interviews including 3 video chats with Digital Hammurabi, Yale Babylonian Collection, and Yale University Press. They also did a podcast interview and a blog interview. Again, those links will be placed in the description of this video. Now, in order to whet your appetite, I do want to take a few moments to read some of the material that is found in this book. Enheduanna is the first poet whose name we know. There are stories and poems far older than hers, as much as 500 years older, but they are all anonymous. In the annals of world literature, Enheduanna marks the earliest known appearance of authorship, the idea that there is a person behind the text speaking to us across time. And yet, despite her pride of place in history and despite the exceptional beauty of her hymns, the world has forgotten about Enheduanna. Western literary history instead begins with Homer, a man who sang his songs some 1,500 years after her death. Today, Enheduanna is known only by a small circle of academics and enthusiasts, but she deserves better. Enheduanna lived around 2300 BCE, and it can be hard to grasp the gap in time that lies between us and her. Julius Caesar lived closer in time to us than to Enheduanna. It is nothing short of miraculous that this ancient woman's voice has survived the passing of centuries, if only as an echo etched into clay, revised and rewritten over many generations. Enheduanna served as high priestess in Ur, a city nestled in the southernmost corner of the country we now call Iraq. She was the daughter of Sargon of Akkad, an emperor who would be remembered for millennia as the paragon of kingship. She lived through a period of profound transformation. The world she was born into was not the same as the one she left behind. Sargon founded the first empire that history has ever seen, and he and his successors worked hard to reshape the cities they had conquered. Enheduanna's installment as high priestess in Ur, one of the largest cities in the empire, was probably part of his political overhaul. But the new empire was also highly unpopular among the old Sumerian nobles, and Enheduanna's life would have been beset by constant revolts. The story of one of those revolts is told in her best-known poem, The Exaltation of Inanna. All of the poems attributed to Enheduanna are hymns. They are not meant to be bedside reading. They do not seek to enlighten or entertain. Hymns are a strange sort of poetry, full of power and persuasion. Their goal is not to describe the world, but to change it by invoking the gods and enlisting their help. To properly praise the gods, the writer of hymns must bring out their terrifying strength. So to read Enheduanna's poems is to enter a world ruled by the violent whims of reckless gods. The hymns that we now label literature were in fact a way for ancient people to defend themselves from the mood swings of the gods. Their lavish praise might soothe the heart of an angry deity, and so keep its wrath at bay, at least for a time. Enheduanna was a master of this genre until she lost her gift. The Exaltation tells us that she was ousted from her temple when a usurper named Lugal-Ane seized power in Ur. The text summons a world driven by rebellion, in which Enheduanna struggles to regain her place of power. She prays for help to Inanna, the moon god whom she had served as high priestess, but to no avail. Inanna ignores her petition, and it seems that Enheduanna has lost command of her famous eloquence. "My honey mouth is full of froth," she writes. "My soothing words are turned to dust." Without those soothing words, she cannot rally the gods to her side, and this leaves her powerless in the face of the revolt. In despair, Enheduanna turns instead to Inanna's daughter, Inanna, begging her to intervene in the moon god's stead. Inanna is the single most complex and compelling goddess of the ancient world. Also known as Ishtar, she was the patron deity of war, sex, change, and destruction. She was said to break every rule and flout every norm. Two of Enheduanna's poems, the Exaltation and the Hymn to Inanna, sing the praises of this awe-inspiring figure. That is no easy task, for as Enheduanna herself says to Inanna in the Exaltation, "It is daunting to sing of your might." Inanna is too puzzling and capricious to be captured in words. In one text, she is a love-struck girl pining for the young shepherd Tammuz. In another, she is a ruthless warrior grinding skulls to dust and feasting on the corpses of her enemies. But in the hymn, Enheduanna finds a way to bring out the central character of this goddess, paradox itself. Now, while these recommendations are rather slim, I can assure you that they are quite informative. And if you are the sort who does look to ancient literature to inform your own spiritual expression, I highly recommend checking them out, especially if you have an interest in Inanna or her Semitic iteration as Ishtar. Now, while this video was rather brief, I do want to go back to long-form content. So if you are interested in staying up to date, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to this channel.